Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. Happy Saturday, friends. It has been a hot minute. I took a break. We've had some like rescheduling, moving stuff around. But I'm happy to be back. And here's the thing, today it's a super special episode for me because I get to have Sophie Youngs with an S. And so if you don't know Sophie, like find her on social. She has all of the amazing tips, content, experience of being in the classroom, being an instructional coach. And so Sophie and I, we're besties. And so what's kind of crazy is like back in the day, you had a teacher bestie that was like in the same building, in the same hallway, right? But now, like Sophie and I had the pleasure, the opportunity to work for a company where my bestie is now like on the other side of the country, basically. And just a little bit of context. Sophie and I, we're the two teachers that should not be sitting next to each other in a faculty meeting.
That's for sure.
Sometimes even like not even in the same room. And so that's been a thing before in the work that her and I have done. But let's get it going. Sophie, how are you?
I am fantastic. Just to like add a little context to how far apart we are, it is 1 p.m. where I am, and it's 9 a.m. where Steve is. So we are definitely long distance besties. And it sort of started before we started working for each other through social media. So this is one of those situations where it's like social media has honestly enriched my life because now I have Steve as my work bestie.
Yeah, no, like that. When I was still in the classroom, there was like a few connections I had made like that, where you don't really meet each other or see each other, unless it's like at a conference. And this was around the pandemic a little bit, where there was a whole lot of nothing going on in terms of opportunities, right? Like there wasn't any conferences going on. So yeah. But we're here to chat about a bunch of things, and hopefully we don't get kicked out of the internet today. So Sophie, just before we get into the conversation, like anybody that's listening, that's watching, and by the way, if you are watching, Mantha, big shout out. She's yes, we are wearing matching tees today. Yeah, we are wearing the matching tees. This was not planned. No, yeah, it was. It was totally planned. And so before we get into it, for those that want to drop in the chat or you want to follow up with us later, if you're watching it sometime in the future, please do so. But Sophie, for those that are listening, watching, a little bit of context of how you got into education, where you are now, and possibly where you're headed.
Wow. So that's a big question. And I always have trouble narrowing down my story, like where does it start? But how did I get into education is always one that I don't tell a lot of people about, because it's not the typical. I'm very non-traditional in a lot of things. Haircut. But also I'm very non-traditional in how I came around to being in education. And where that is actually, I was heavily involved in 4-H when I was in middle school, high school, college. And I was like, I want to counsel 4-H camps. And that's why I got into education, because I wanted the summers off to go do 4-H camps around the state, around the country. And yeah, that didn't pan out. But and that's why I started going into education. And also like a lot of 4-Hers end up going into education because we're about leadership, we're about mentoring others, and we're about leaving the place better than where you had it like when you went into it, leave the place better as when you leave. So I was like, I want the summers off so I can do 4-H. And that's how I sort of went into education. But then when I went into education, I found more of a passion, the root of my passion. So I was a middle school math teacher for 3 years in a very low socioeconomic area, where I was like another mom to these kids. And we didn't care if the kid had an official IEP or not. We were going to do anything and everything for that child. And that is where I really learned my passion for accessibility for all children, no matter what the legal says that we need to do. Even when it comes to feeding them, dressing them, and then providing them with an education the best way for them. So I was there for 3 years, and then my husband graduated from pharmacy school and got a job, and we relocated us I taught technology integration math, which was seriously the perfect job for me. But then that job was gone in like a year. So I was only there for a year, and then I taught 8th grade math and then science, 7th and 8th grade. So middle school is my sweet spot. Those children, when they come in literally with their baby fat still on, and then they leave almost grown whole human beings that are like twice the size they were when they came in the building. That's my sweet spot. I love those children. And then after my science year, I transitioned to coaching because I missed all of that technology integration and sharing how I was using the technology integration in the classroom. And then the district, my principal actually was like, this position's coming up. You should do it. And I was like, okay. I applied for this job 2 different times. My then work BFF got it the first time. And so then I taught for I think I taught for 2 more years until another position, exactly the same one, came open. So then I got to be like working with her to do this position. So my work BFF was a science teacher and then became a coach. And then I was a science teacher in her same room and then became a coach. And so we sort of joke about how we just sort of follow each other's footsteps. And she moved up to the district level. And after I was a coach for like 5.5 years, I stepped out of that role as well and went to work for an ed tech company where I get to do the same thing, is coaching purposeful integration of technology into the classroom where it actually helps with accessibility for all. And I wouldn't work for this company if I didn't fully, truly believe in the ability for the product to do what I love, which is to level up instruction and provide accessibility accommodations and modifications for every single student, no matter what the paperwork says.
Yeah. Can I just ask, are they hiring? I'd love to work there. So yeah. If you don't know, now you know. Sophie and I work for the same company, and that's how like we knew each other, and then we started to work together at a company called Cami, and just our relationship, our friendship, really just blossomed into this beautiful thing where like everyone has this experience, whether you're a teacher or an admin or not even in education, like you have that person, right, that you rely on, and really like that person that not only gets you through the day, but also like is there for you for the good stuff, but sometimes more importantly, like the darker times in life, right? And so for me, that's what Sophie has been, as I've entered into ed tech out of the classroom. And it's, and Sophie and I were also like, I feel really lucky that we're a part of a team that is really supportive. And because when you're in public education, you don't always have people around you that are supportive. It can be a different vibe, and you do have those people, right? Like that teacher down the hall, that person right next door, right? Whatever the case is. And so Sophie and I, we complement each other because while we have a lot of geeky interest, and kind of just one right here, I have this hat. I don't know if I've worn this hat on the show yet. But so we have this. We have a video game interest, right? But we're also quite different. So Sophie will put the time. There you go. There you go, sis. There you go.
That doesn't stay on. So my diadem is
Uh-oh.
having some issues because I've had it for so long, and my children get into my geeky stuff. But that's one of the I actually had the peach crown ready to put on, but some issues with my children. So I do have this one. So I will do this.
Nice. Nice. And so like we have, we have a lot of commonality, and you probably experience this, those that are watching, listening, like those people that you connect with, there's also a lot of differences, right? So I'm more of the, how do I put this? I'm not saying I don't prepare for things, but there are moments where I'm like, I'm not going to prepare for it. So like the way that I used to teach was really like, even though it was a little bit archaic, like this idea of like, I'm going to teach by like writing out and like drawing and making maps and like, but I don't, there's no preparation with that. It's just whatever's out of my head onto like a digital environment. Right. Well, Sophie does a beautiful job of like the slides, the graphics, that she'll do all that. And Sophie also comes with data. I don't always come with data. Even though I do a lot of what I do now is work with data, and I love that. So with respect to this topic of besties, right? Of course, Sophie came with data, and I did not. So, so Sophie, kind of tell us about this. Like, what is the data show us in terms of having that person in the workplace?
Well, I didn't like go and do the research myself, but I did ask my good friend Gemini to help me out and provide me with some data that's out there about work besties. And and then I've asked it 2 different times. So let's see what it has. And it actually it gives me the source, which I'm like, sweet. If only I'd had this in my first time going through college, that'd be great. 70% plus of employees say that having friends at work is the most crucial element for fulfilling work life. So honestly, I can't imagine coming to work and not having at least some type of camaraderie, relationship, rapport with the people that I work with, because that would be a really lonely part of your life, because you do that for the majority of your day. Like, wow, to not have friendships and relationships and chit chats and things that are more than just work conversations. I mean, I guess you can do that, but it's also kind of boring. But then like going and hanging out after work, doing like paint nights together. Because in my old jobs as a teacher and as a coach, we would do paint nights together. We would do slumber parties at someone's house that had like a hot tub or something. We would go to escape rooms together and then to dinner. And it was just nice to have people that supported you more than just your work life. And of course, you always have like your work relationships that you chit chat in the hallway and help each other do projects that are very work related. But then when you actually get to know each other more than your skills at work, you sort of create friendships. And then when you get past even that, to know like the dark sides, the quirks, I know you're going to struggle with this type of thing. Let me like go ahead and try and help you out is really powerful. And I've worked in 4 different schools in multiple roles. And I've always found myself with a work bestie that knew me more than just the person that worked down the hall. And they were pivotal. They really were. They were this pivotal person. And I can remember, like, I have a terrible memory. Like my students, I don't remember their names. I remember their faces, but I remember their names, right? Mantha's saying that she still grabs dinner with her former teacher besties from school 3 years after leaving. And with me in particular, I have ADHD. And so like out of sight, out of mind is really prevalent for me. So when I leave the workplace that I was at, sometimes those relationships don't sustain. But like I went into a school as a teacher, was taught there for a year, made amazing relationships, went away for a couple of years, and then came back as a coach. Those friendships picked right back up where they left off because we still loved each other. It was just that we didn't have that connection anymore of that workplace. It's also very important to have friends outside of work so that they continuously be your friend no matter where you go. But in my experience, a lot of my closest friends at that time are the ones that I'm working with because I do spend more time with them than I do outside of work, especially after I became a mom. Because if I'm not at work, I'm with my kids. All right, some more data. My bad.
Well, hold on. Before you get into that, because one thought that came to mind for any teachers that are listening, right? Like this concept of like having those connections and not being isolated, because being isolated can be damaging, right? It can be. I think it's even more important for teachers because of the percentage, like the amount of time they spend with kids in their box. Like I used to joke about that. I'm like, man, I'm stuck in my box, right? Like it's not like, I get to go. It's like in an office where you'd be like, oh, I can just roam around outside of my cubicle, right? Which
you
I guess
are stuck in your box and like you can't even go to the bathroom.
Getting to go to the bathroom. Yeah. So having those connections, I think for teachers is even more important. But then like navigating, because we all know this to be fact, right? Like elephant in the room. Like you go to a teacher break room and
it could be toxic in there.
That's what I wanted you to say, that, not me. But like, yeah, it can be taught. And that was my memory of public education, right? Like if there was any like negative part of that, was like the negativity. So then you have to navigate, who do you talk to? Who's in your circle? You have to naturally be in part of circles because of the work that you're doing and the collaboration that takes place, into circles that you have to bite your tongue or play the game, so to speak, right? And so
that goes a lot with the morale and the community that's in that school too, because I've been in schools where everyone is super happy, and then I've been in schools where everyone's not super happy. And it depends on your viewpoint and how jaded, I guess, you are. And a lot of that comes from administration as well. So like if the way that the administration isn't handling a situation, or if it's like a repetitive, like, something isn't going to happen the way that you think it's going to happen, or that you think it should happen. And that's also, it's just communication too. Like you need to have open communication with your administrators and your peers. Talk to them about when you're upset or when you're confused, and have the community where you're allowed to do that, because sometimes questioning is looked down upon. So it really find your safe space, and then also just, I had to do this in a few places. Like I tried to be the shining light in the jaded circle, because that was the circle that I had. So I tried to always find like the positive of it, or I would change the subject to something else, or I would lean into it because I needed to vent too. So it was nice to have, like, misery loves company. It was nice to have someone that could understand what I was going through, but then also it was difficult to be in a situation where all they wanted to do was vent.
Yeah. No, yeah. And then also, like, I kind of loved your point earlier with talking about confusions, because from an admin, I guess, point of view, and also like the culture at large, like having a culture of like, it's okay to be confused. Like it is, like, it's almost like normalizing confusion, because sometimes people bottle that up. They're like, I don't want to be the dummy to raise my hand and be like, wait, I don't understand this, right? And there was some growing for me with that when I first got to Cami. And I was like, oh, wait, it is okay to be confused here, because it fosters that dialogue of like, oh, wait, I was also confused, Steve. That like, and then working through that and ideating through that and making sure that, you know, there is like visibility and transparency on different like, you know, workflows. But I think that's important for like schools, because there's a lot of confusion in schools, like of how things work. Like, to me, that's more transparent now. Training teachers, I'm like, oh, we don't. There's a lot that we don't know, like not just with the technology, but also like the way things work legislatively, or how the system works, or just how their kids work.
Or even as simple as, where's the construction paper that I'm allowed to use to do this project with? Like,
Yeah.
there's just, you don't know what you don't know. My very first year teaching, I was in the box, as Steve said. I was in, and that was probably the second worst year of my teaching experience. My last year was my worst. And then I remember talking to my husband, who was my fiance then, and being like, my friends are my students, and that's a bad place to be. Because no, I wasn't talking to anybody else. There was no other conversations going on. I didn't have an after school life because I was staying there till 7 p.m. grading and preparing, because we didn't have a textbook that I could really like work from to get me started. It was more of just a resource. So I was creating everything myself. And it was a downward spiral into loneliness and depression. And without having somebody was terrible, and it was a terrible experience. But then you flash forward like 5 years, and then I was working at a school where there were 3 of us teaching the same topic, the same subject, and we were trading ideas, sharing resources, and creating the tests together. Someone would create the test, someone would create the lesson plan, someone would create the answer key, and it was just amazing. It was amazing. We would go to dinners together and have group chats and just have fun with each other and with our students, with the projects that we were doing all together. And that was the best teaching year I've ever had.
So I'm glad you brought this up. And Sophie, I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but part of my experience in public education, and I don't know if this was the same for you, and not everyone, but like there's some teachers out there that they almost like refuse to want to collaborate and share. It's almost like it's almost like they're purposefully like wanting to be isolated. And I guess at the end of the day, that's their own choice. I don't know if you experienced that, because that I think is like a huge roadblock to making those connections, right?
When I was a coach, there was a teacher I can think of in particular that was like, this was my idea. And they didn't want to share it because they didn't want someone else taking it and trying to claim it as theirs. And I was like, and I get that a little bit. Like, I come up with a lot of great ideas, and then someone will tweak it just a smidge and then say it's their idea. And I'm like, But if you're bettering education in the long run, does it really matter where the idea came from? Because you probably got it from
what's the purpose? What's the purpose of creating something in as a teacher, right? Like, is it for yourself or is it for all kids, right?
And if you have a really great idea and it's working for you and your students and they are being successful, why wouldn't you share that? Why wouldn't you let other people know what you were doing so that others can do it too? And I was all about, here, this is literally everything I've ever done. Take it and do it. And let me know how you improve on it. But yeah, it was also, she was up in her corner of the room of the building and wouldn't come down and share only with some people that didn't teach the same thing. So that she didn't share materials. And then like I'm like, okay, you do you.
Yeah, no. Okay, so we kind of went on a tangent there because Sophie, you did mention that you have more numbers.
I do.
Yeah. So.
Employees with a best friend at work are 7 times more likely to be fully engaged in their role. So, for those of you who are administrators or bosses or managers, it benefits you and the company or school system as a whole if they do develop relationships. But one of the things that I was reading in one of the articles that they did, it was like, you can't force it though. They're either going to happen naturally or not. So you can't go into a situation and be like, okay, I'm speaking from experience. Who's going to be my work hubby? Who's going to be my work wifey? Who's going to be the bestie? And like pick them and then target them because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's just got to be one of those natural things. You can do things to help encourage that. And there are that you could do, especially if you're physically in person, like you can encourage potlucks and picnics and faculty things to do together. Some companies have like softball teams that they do outside of work hours and stuff. But you can't put people together in a room and expect it to happen.
So that's a really good point, right? Because Sophie, like you and I kind of like, again, supernatural, right? Like I joined Cami, and then I'm like, oh, we have a lot of similarities. But then we're able to joke and tease even like what our differences are. So what if you are a leader, you're an administrator who, how do you foster that without being too forceful? Like I would imagine that an administrator would want that for his or her teachers, right?
Mhm.
But I'm just trying to think like what's the best way to foster that kind of environment.
Well, it's a fine line because you don't want to be like forcing the subject, but you also just want to be sort of encouraging that type of thing. So during faculty meetings where they're required to be there, you can do the dreaded warm-up activities, icebreakers and stuff. And even though teachers say they hate them, they really do learn a lot about their peers if they are even half invested in those sort of icebreaker type of things. And then you have organized time to be together that isn't structured. Yes, Samantha, shut her icebreakers. That isn't so structured. Like you gather during a time where everyone's supposed to be at work, but you provide food for them to come and just sit and chat. And sometimes you don't like you encourage it by being the model. Like you go and you build sort of relationships yourself while also being professional as a leader. And then I think what's really cool about what a leader can do is that they know the strengths of people and they can encourage, hey, why don't you share that idea with so-and-so because they were going to try and do the same kind of thing and sort of I just saw your cup. And just sort of like encourage the collaboration that they're already interested in. Our current boss actually has done that with me a few times to sort of help foster, because we're in a weird situation where if we don't purposefully try to connect with somebody because we are literally all over the country, we're not going to hang out with them. We're not going to talk to them. So he has encouraged others to be like, well, why don't you talk to Sophie about that? Because she's really good at that. And he has encouraged me, well, why don't you talk to so-and-so about that? Because they have a blah, blah, blah. So those natural conversations that are work related that just sort of bloom organically. So that, I guess that would be something else that leaders can do to like get to know your staff yourself and then encourage
And that's where like I've seen certain principals, administrators at school sites where they have like they don't turn off. Like they're always like, I'm the leader all the time. And it's almost the same as like having like being that way with your students, where I'm the teacher, I'm always in control, really strict, but they don't get to know who you are. They don't get to see the real you. They don't see that. So that's a really good point of like of modeling that kind of behavior.
Yeah. I mean, students model what they see, children model what their parents are doing, and then also your workers are going to sort of model and feel more comfortable doing things if they see you doing them as well. So if they want to do a kickball, slip and slide pool activity, you do it too. Make it happen. That was something that we wanted to do one school year, but for insurance purposes, we couldn't do it. But that didn't keep me from making a 100-foot slip and slide at my house and inviting them over.
That's fair. That's fair. So I'm gonna switch hats. Kind of talk about like, yeah, Sophie and I are besties and like that dynamic. Mantha is in the chat, so Mantha will appreciate this. So
See if this
it's like the little things sometimes where someone will send you a gift at my company.
Mantha's
My boss,
gifts.
yeah, my boss has sent me things that I don't know that I have offhand. So here's something, and I share this on a different podcast, the High Tech Podcast. I'm gonna plug them really quick. Good friends of ours. Sophie's been on the show.
I love the High Tech Podcast.
Yeah. So I did share this on their podcast. So I got this in the mail, and I was like, "Who sent me this?" So I do have a passion. I wouldn't even say a love, a passion for Star Wars. So Sophie sent me this one.
For those of you listening and not seeing, it's a Jabba the Hutt mug, coffee mug.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, because people will be listening to this on like a Spotify or an Apple. But yeah, it's a Jabba the Hutt mug. I don't know if this is actually intended to be used for actual fluid. It's so big. I've tried it once. It mostly works out, but I do love it. And then Mantha sent me this. This is
Hey Frankie.
Wild.
What did Mantha give you?
And so here's a hat.
Oh, I remember seeing this.
You can customize it, and it does say Bestie. And I've done things where like I have it say Riley. There's like an app that you, of course, everything has an app. Like different like built-in stuff. There's a shout out to Mantha for that. So Mantha, I appreciate you. And again, it's about those connections. It doesn't have to be just one person. It can be several. Frankie, oh my gosh.
Yes, Frankie's thank you so much for joining, Frankie. But yeah, Mantha, I was just reading her comment about Secret Santa. That one, the best. People that are into Secret Santa really go for Secret Santa. And the one and only high school I ever worked at, I was the coach there, and we did Secret Santa, and it was an optional thing for people to do. And we fill out this form, and then your Secret Santa pulls a name, and the organizer gives you their list. People go hard. It was like every week you gave them a little something, and then at the end, we tried to guess who our Secret Santa was. It was amazing. The one year I was pregnant, and I was getting like Gatorade and Ritz crackers. It was perfect.
Secret Santa will always remind me of The Office.
Yeah, see, I don't watch that show.
Yeah, I guess that's one of my other obsessions is The Office. Besides Star Wars, so just want to put this out because I've not advertised this on social yet, because we are joined by our friend Frankie, who's like just a phenomenal human. My next guest on the show is in fact Frankie.
Oh, yeah, that's exciting.
So be looking out for that, I believe next week. And so I'm super thrilled to have Frankie on the show. And so like everyone listening, be on the lookout for that. So Sophie, we have do we have more data?
Of course Have as much as you want. Oh, it's actually a safer environment if you have strong social connections at your work. And you can actually increase productivity and profit by having natural friendships and relationships at work. So that's a 36% decrease in safety incidents and 12% increase in profit and productivity, whatnot, because people enjoy coming. And it, for me in particular, sometimes I'll just like go into a Slack huddle with somebody and we'll just like sit there and work without even talking to each other. But knowing that there's a person there to like bounce an idea off while you're processing, writing an email, or this isn't working, what should I do next, is like half the battle. Because when you're in an office space, especially, you're like next to people, and then you can like, everybody else is working, so then you're working too. And it's like the peer pressure. Perfect example of that is my kids hated taking naps, but when they went to, and they would fight taking naps, but going to daycare, everybody else was laying down to take a nap, so they did too. The daycare people, like, he just went out like a light. So everybody else around you's doing it, then you're going to do it too. But if you don't care about the people around you, then you don't really care what they're doing. But if you do care, then yeah. So anyways, I don't know where I'm going with that.
But what about when you're in a Slack huddle by yourself?
That's where the music.
Yes.
The Slack huddle music is like this soft jazz, and I know because I'm in them alone. And our other bestie, I don't know the story fully, but apparently Megan was in a Slack huddle by herself yesterday.
But I don't know, that was not intentional. Like she had okay, and then Mantis here to confirm that the music does slap in the Slack huddle.
It's nice. And it's more than one song, so it like rotates through.
It actually scared me one day because I think I accidentally had my volume fairly high, and I was like waiting for someone kind of thing in the huddle itself. And then music just came on, and I was like, wait, I don't have my Spotify on, or like I had no idea where it was coming from. I was like, oh, today I learned that Slack will play music for you, which is good.
Yes, and it's also a little shady too, because when you come out of that Slack huddle where you were by yourself, it's like, was that a good meditative time? Like 1 minute by yourself?
Oh, really? Like
Yeah.
it knows?
Like it knows you were in there by yourself, and it's like, oh, I hope that was a productive session by yourself.
I feel that's like low key Slack just being like, hey, loser. Wow. Okay, cool. Like I said, we may get kicked out of the internet today. Okay, cool. So Sophie, what else you got? Eager to learn more about this topic.
Your work is more enjoyable if you have a friend. 60% of people find work more enjoyable. So even if the stuff that you're doing, you're not enjoying so much, it's more fun to do if you have friendships there. Like, never mind. Again, productivity, emotional support, loyalty. This one actually surprised me. People are a lot less likely to leave a job if they have a work bestie. So you're more likely to stay there, because not necessarily that you're loyal to the job, but you're loyal to the people at the job, because the job is more than just the job.
Yeah. So, because I know that you had done somewhere on social where you had posed that question, and it got pretty good responses. And don't quote me, but paraphrasing the question of like, who here has been in the situation where your really close friend, teacher friend, just leaves, like goes to a different district, even a different school site, right, a different role. And people were like almost like universally, like, you talk to any, not just teacher, but any human, they have had that happen to them. And I know that like I experienced that when I left my district, right, there was like some strong connections, and there's some that I still have there, right? Like our kids play together, kind of thing. She's not live right now, but Heather Freeberg is will be probably listening to this at some point, right? So her daughter and I both still play together. Phenomenal science teacher in Modesto, California. But then there's like other people, right? That kind of spoke to that and how challenging that was.
Yeah. Anywhere from like crying to being mad at them, leaving with them to go.
I'm packing my bags too.
I'm going too. Like, you can't leave me here, type of thing.
Yeah.
And as the one that has bounced around a lot, it's exciting. And sometimes it wasn't really my choice. Like, that position was leaving when I went from teaching 8th grade math with those two other teachers teaching the same thing to teaching science. That wasn't my choice either. They were cutting positions and I was the newest one there, type of thing. So sometimes it's not your choice, so people aren't as upset with you about it. But when it is your choice, and then you get like the so sorry you're leaving plant, and then your coworker gets the I'm so glad you're staying plant, and it's the same plant. Type of thing. Like, when it's your choice, you're excited to leave on this new adventure and maybe better pay, better benefits, better work situation, whatever it may be. People want to be happy for you, but they're also jealous and bitter that you're leaving them, like your traitor or something like that. And I have gone through all of those things where I've been the one leaving mostly. Yeah, I've been the one leaving for the most part. And those relationships that I have had, some of them stay. Some of them are still really amazing. I lean on them for other situations. Some of them stayed for a few years after I left that building and now have sort of fizzled. And some of them end as soon as I walk out that door. And it's sad to think that you can be so close to someone like that, but it was literally only tied to the building that you were in.
The job itself, right? Like the actual work. Yeah. So there was this didn't happen when I was there, but my former school, there was like some story. There was a story that like something that happened well before I got there. And it was the situation where student population, my understanding is that student population shrank over the course of like maybe a year or two. So then my department at that time, before I got there, they were overstaffed by one teacher. So they're like, okay, cool. There are 5 courses that are no longer needed, kind of thing, based off student population. So apparently, it was almost like they had a, in that situation for at least my district, that means somebody else, they don't lose their job in the district, but they have to go teach at a different school, which in Modesto is kind of a big deal. Like, you might be on the way other side of town. Like, do you have to drive like half an hour to get there? You're now in a different neighborhood, a different area. And so like, it was literally like, oh, we have to draw straws to see who goes. I'm like, that would be terrifying.
And like, it's literally drawing straws. I've had friends where their seniority date is the exact same date. And they went from having 3 4th grade teachers to 2 4th grade teachers. They literally stand together and draw straws, like literal straws.
Right.
And I'm like, really? It's literal straws? Like, you literally, in the age that we are in technology, you're literally drawing like sticks out of a hat type of thing. I'm like, what? So she had to do that. And she got to stay while her counterpart had to go to another school, another grade level, another everything.
Yeah. And that may have been the situation of like, maybe it was the 4 or 5 teachers, bottom of the totem pole kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Right. Or like the veterans, the ones that have been in the district for like, 20 years, like they're safe and
they're staying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I remember that being kind of a thing. But I think like even stuff like that can break up a good relationship, a good connection. Um, and that could be like, that can impact somebody. And in that situation, it's not like you can go with them.
Yeah. Because there's
Right.
probably not a job available in that same area or even in that same district, because if you're like cutting, then they're just trying to find places to fit everybody. And I feel like that's what's happening. For those of you that don't know, I'm from West Virginia. So that's how far away we are from each other, California and West Virginia. And then like, it's like the students are getting less and less students. So then people are moving around. And that's how a lot of my roles, like why I moved so much, is like, we used to have so many teachers, but not enough students to accommodate everybody. So you get your first job, yay! But then the very next year, everyone's shifting around, and you're the newest one. So then this experienced teacher up here that's been in the district for more than you and is certified there gets your job, and you get booted out, and you have to try to find another one. And with me, I'm certified to teach secondary science, secondary math, and elementary, like middle school, secondary science and math. Like I can teach 9th grade in the high school level. But for like tech integration, I can do K through 12. I'm certified for that. But then I was also elementary K-5. And I went from an 8th grade math teacher. The first place they put me, because they were cutting math and English teachers at the school, was 1st grade. And I was like, no. I am a middle school teacher. You cannot put me down teaching 1st grade. And like, I had never taught anybody how to read. I had like the fundamentals of reading. I've never taught anybody, like 1st grade was a never been before. And I had been teaching for 5 years at this point in time. And it's always been middle schoolers. And I was like, this is way out of my wheelhouse. You honestly need to find another place for me. So then we did some internal transferring, and I went to 3rd grade, and then I actually got the science job at the middle school on the other side of the county. But yeah, like I went from only a 15-minute car ride, 20-minute car ride to my school to 45-minute car ride. And then in other places in the district that I could have been transferred to is like an hour to get there. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Because I'm on this extreme side of the county, so I could go. The counties in West Virginia are our districts, so it's not like towns and like it is in other states. Every county is its own district.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, that is different. Because yeah, like my county alone will have. I don't even know how many districts we have. We have so many, right?
Yeah.
That is different. Cool. All right. So we're coming up towards the end here. And so friends, we always pose up this question for those that have been watching and listening to the show throughout this first season. We always pose up this question, and Sophie, you'll be no different. But the big premise of the show is, what is top of mind? What is under the hat? And so like Sophie, like you've experienced so much. I know that you did, like myself, like you did a lot of work during the pandemic, right? You saw the education leave the pandemic, but now you're like myself on more of like, it's a really different vantage point of the training the teachers, meeting them at conferences, hearing what they have to say, and not just teachers, but also leaders. And so just curious where you are, like, what is something that we need to be talking about, like, generally, and what is something that maybe you're concerned about, or maybe what is something that we're doing well right now?
I guess sort of what's on top of mind right now for me is like when we were during the pandemic, it was all the tech all the time, just throwing money at technology. And we were learning like all of these different things. And then teachers got burnt out on it. And some of them went way backwards and just went paper pencil, like to the extreme. And others embraced it and were like, this was really good. The kids love doing it. So they keep doing it. So I would love for those teachers that went way back to the other direction to embrace it some more again. Well, actually, they didn't really embrace it then because I was a coach during the pandemic. So I was coaching teachers and teaching them how to use technology that they literally never touched during their time in the classroom. And I don't have any other hats around me right now. I had planned a Princess Peach crown, but I don't. It's out there with my children, I guess. But yeah, so, but then now it's. I was that pivotal person for my school, helping literally every single teacher. I found Cami for us to use and purposefully and integrated it into our curriculum, not only for that year when we were shut down, but the following year when we were hybrid, and then the following year after that, because it was just an amazing tool for accessibility. My first ones that loved it so much were my special education teachers, because students were learning independently for the very first time. They could have it read aloud to them, and they didn't need to have another human being sitting next to them in order for them to do something. Those students were so appreciative of the ability to do something on their own. It wasn't even funny. That experience being a coach during the pandemic really opened my eyes to how much technology can change the life of the student, and how much a coach is helping that. And what's happening now is all that funding is going away, and districts they're cutting the coach.
Yes, the actual position.
Yes. They're cutting the coaching position out of their budgets, which it doesn't matter how much technology you're paying for if no one's teaching the teachers how to use it. It doesn't matter how much technology you have in the building, in the district, in the classroom. If the teacher doesn't know how to use it, isn't in an environment where they feel like they can try it, and doesn't have someone there helping them figure it out, because they don't have the time to figure it out.
Right.
And that is something that is on top of my mind. And my friend Bonnie down in Louisiana, she's at the state board. Hi, Bonnie, love you. She posts things about that as well, about like, you can't be cutting the coaches when, like, it doesn't matter how many computers you have in your classroom if they don't know how to use them. So yeah, that's on top of my mind. That's my please stop cutting the coaching positions, because they are extremely pivotal. But I understand the logic behind it too. They're cutting the coaching positions because they need that body in a classroom.
Well, and so that was going to be my point here, is that when you're in that situation where you have a coach, and in my area, it's not just the coaches, it's like more like the director who's like, sometimes it's like the leader who's looking after not like the IT stuff, but like the curriculum and instruction of the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I've seen that too. And it's like, I look at it both ways, kind of like in multiple ways, like you are, of like the person that has to go from that kind of position, say a coach or a director position, back into the classroom, that is really good for those 25 kids. Like, that is awesome. But it's also like a waste of knowledge, talent. It's not really utilizing like that person's, all the resources that come with, you know, with that individual. Right. And yeah, it's good for that classroom. But if you're in the classroom, like if you were like a Steve or a Sophie at your school site, where like you have that tech brain, you have the pedagogy, you have the eye for it. Like, we didn't have time in our classrooms to always share that with, for me, the 100 other teachers that were at my school. I understand like some schools are smaller, right? Where it's like, you know, 30, 40, but even that is like, you can't expect,
or even less than 30.
Yeah. Like, but like it's, but it's one of those things where like, that shouldn't be a teacher's burden. is my point. And so yeah, I certainly see that as something that needs to be addressed, and we'll see what happens over time, especially kind of the workforce that our students are going to enter, right? Like there are certain things that, and I'm not talking about just like learning the technology, but also what the technology provides with the collaboration, with the marketing skills that come with that, the entrepreneurship, the, using it for critical thinking purposes, like all these things that the workforce needs. And when I go and I observe my student teachers, and I'm in the field, the teachers that really, or the situations that really lean into the pen and paper, just pen and paper, it does look a lot of like just talking at kids for 50 minutes. And that is not representative of what kids need and what the workforce needs.
Because you're not going to go to a job and be talked to for 50 minutes. Well, maybe during meetings, but that's like a once a week. That's not an everyday thing. And one of the things that when I went, I left because I was a barista in college. I worked at a daycare in high school, but then when I actually like real, like an adult job, it's always been teaching or coaching in the public school system until I came to Cami. And I'm like, I went into this job thinking I only need to be the expert at one tool, Cami. That's the only tool I need to really know how to do. Boy, was I wrong. There are so many different tools that we're using to reach out to our customers, to reach out to our teachers, to organize training, to organize projects. And I've actually have learned so much about different technologies and had the opportunity to dive into a bunch of different AI tools. Like I have Gemini open all the time just to help me with literally everything. I have a random question and I ask Gemini all the time. And now they're coming out with like tools to help you organize your schedule. And I'm honestly like, seriously, can it like put things in priority for me and like tell me what to do? Because that would be fantastic. Especially with my ADHD brain, everything has the same priority. Everything is on fire. So it takes work for me to figure out what isn't actually on fire and what can wait. And if something did that for me, how much more productive could I be? But like, that's just thinking about like when I was going through high school or even college or even during my second master's in education, like AI wasn't a thing. And now it's a part of my everyday working life. So it is extremely important to have that mind that isn't thinking on all the different strategies that need to be happening in their classroom, that isn't trying to differentiate and personalize learning for 25, 33 different minds in their classroom. You really need to have that other mind that's doing the background knowledge, listening to the teachers and their problems and their needs and their struggles to try and find that solution for them and help them integrate it into their new workflow little by little so that they don't feel overwhelmed and that they feel confident in doing it. And some teachers are doing that for themselves and finding PLNs on social media that help them find that. But other teachers aren't, and they need that local support. And just like you would for your students, you want to meet them where they are. You need to meet your teachers where they are as well. And if you don't have that support helping them to prepare students for jobs that literally don't exist yet. And that to me is so apparent right now because AI has come out. It was not there. It was not something. And now there are so many jobs out there that are using AI, dependent on AI, creating AI, that like, what? My son's in first grade. What jobs are out there going to be there when he is coming into the workforce? And he's autistic. And because of AI, what jobs is he going to be able to do because we have AI? Even though he's not speaking yet. He could learn to talk later. But like, it's literally the world is wide open. And these opportunities, these things are you can't imagine them. You can't fathom them because I never fathomed AI being right here at my fingertips. And I'm a pretty creative, wide open world thinking, and that was never one of the ideas that I thought. So it's really amazing to think about that. And if you're still sitting there with your kids in rows, lecturing them, and they're taking notes, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a surface for your kids.
So that's another passion that Sophie and I share is like, you know, where from an instructional standpoint, where we're headed, where we're not headed at times, right?
Mhm.
So we're out of time, friends.
I know. I
So
looked down and I was like, wow, that went fast.
it does, it always does. But especially this one, Sophie, we really appreciate you. For anybody that is interested in learning more from Sophie, level up Sophie on all the social channels. She's an amazing human with just a depth of knowledge, with teaching, with industry, and we just really appreciate you, Sophie. Yeah.
Thanks for
Okay.
having me. I love you too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, friends. So you enjoy the rest of your Saturday. We're gonna catch Frankie next week. That was dropped earlier. And as always, keep your hats on, but your minds open. Bye-bye.